right, everyone, we need to talk about the hot topic. Virginia topic number 1. Well, maybe 2. Anyway, we're going to talk about what happened last night and what's going on in Charlottesville, Virginia. So Charlottesville, Virginia, take 2. Only this is Black Lives Matter activists going to the University of Virginia and putting a tarp over the statue of Thomas Jefferson, the founder of the University of Virginia, with a sign that says TJ is a racist and a rapist. I have to do this video in under a certain amount of time, and I can talk to you for hours about this topic, so I'm going to try and condense it down. Let's go. What's happening in Charlottesville, Virginia, in Richmond, Virginia with Monument Avenue? This is because we have weak leadership in Richmond. We have 3 knuckleheads running for governor. Northam, Hydra, Gillespie. All weak on this subject of protecting our history. I work in the history field. I want it protected. Ed Gillespie's a knucklehead, Northam's a knucklehead, and Hydra's a knucklehead, because none of them are willing to come out and say that they would protect our monuments, protect our history. Virginia's first motto, Virginia's motto, Virginia is for history lovers. That was our motto before they took history out, and now it just says Virginia is for lovers. But it originally was Virginia is for history lovers. We like to teach you about our history. Thomas Jefferson, first I have to tell you that history should be looked at as we find it. Meaning you need to take the social norms, the mores of the 18th century and judge it by those standards. You can't take the mores of today, of the 21st century, and look back 200 years and judge people 200 years based on what is normal and moral today. Because we would not like, nor would we think it would be fair, that 200 years in the future, people are going to be looking back and judging us by the standards of their morals and what is their norms of society 200 years from now. Okay, so you need to learn how to learn about history before you can really judge it and learn about it. So that's the disclaimer. Thomas Jefferson a racist? I'm no fan of Thomas Jefferson. I don't care about Thomas Jefferson. But racist? I don't think so. At least not the way that we're judging it today. And not in his time. Thomas Jefferson was born into a world with slaves. He inherited slaves. He bought slaves. He sold slaves. That was normal for a man of his time. So if you're judging him saying, well, he owned slaves, so he's a racist, end of story, well, then fine. Stop the video. We don't need to go any further. Thomas Jefferson and a lot of the men of the 18th century knew slavery was wrong. They tried to end slavery within their lifetime. They knew it had to be ended in their lifetime if it were to be ended without bloodshed. They were unable to do this. These are men who are human. They're not perfect. They're not demigods. And we need to stop looking at them as though they are gods. They're men with the same weaknesses and strengths that a human has. They're human. They did great things, but they were still human. They're not gods, not demigods. And Ben Franklin said, I don't want to be judged as a demigod. Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. You all know this. That is one of the things he wanted to be remembered for. The other thing he wanted to be remembered for was the author for the statute for religious freedom in Virginia, which is the freedom for religion, not freedom against religion or freedom from religion. It was the statute of religious freedom statute for religious freedom. So not, not separation of church and state as we're being told that it is today. The third thing he wanted to be remembered for was for being the founder of the University of Virginia. Those are the only 3 things he wanted to be remembered for out of all of the things he accomplished in his life. Jefferson in 1779 is on a on a committee to draft legislation with George Mason, who primarily drafted Virginia's Declaration of Rights, and Edmund Pendleton, who was the man who oversaw our transition from Commonwealth, or from colony to Commonwealth. Lots more can be said about Edmund Pendleton, but I need to be brief. In 1779, they drafted the bill for emancipation of slaves. And what that emancipation would entail is that the master must provide an education of a trade for their slave, and the slave would then be freed at 18 for girls and 21 for boys. The reason at 18 for girls and 21 for boys is because in the 18th century, that was the age of majority for boys and girls. So it was a different age of majority. I guess girls mature faster than boys. That's why they reach their age of majority at 18. And when that bill is presented to the legislature here in Williamsburg, Jefferson is elected to the position of governor. He's the second elected governor in Virginia. And he is not allowed at that point to go to the Capitol building and to lobby for that legislation, because we wanted separation of powers. We just overthrew the royal governor, who was the head of the executive, legislative, judicial, church, and military in the colony of Virginia. So they wanted clear daylight between the branches of government. So Jefferson was not allowed to go down and say, hey, I want this bill passed. What do I got to do? Who do I got to lean on? He couldn't do that. And that bill goes down to defeat in the House of Delegates. Jefferson, at the end of his life, he can't free his slaves. Jefferson likes to live large, right? Spend that money. He likes to live large, and he's in debt. He's living beyond his means. Sound familiar? The problem is when he dies, his property has to be sold to satisfy the debts of his estate. Unfortunately for him, that deals in human lives, because slaves, when he dies, are considered to be property, and property must be sold to settle the debts of the estate. Therefore, he could not free his slaves legally. And you cannot legally free your slaves in the 18th century unless you have an act of legislation. So you would have to go to the legislative body and explain why your slave should be freed. And then the legislative body would vote on whether or not that slave would be freed, or the royal governor could grant freedom, or they could purchase their freedom. There's only a few ways that a slave could become free. So a master couldn't turn to their slave and say, you're free, have a happy life. It didn't happen that way. And anyone who tells you that is trying to sell you an agenda. He's so in debt when he dies that I think his family, if they don't outright lose Monticello, they come very close to losing Monticello. So again, he can't free his slaves legally because they have to be sold to satisfy the debts. So the second part is Thomas Jefferson a rapist? Thomas Jefferson's first wife, or his only wife, is Martha Scales Whaley, I think her last name is. And Martha Skelton Wales. And she ends up passing away, I think, in 1780. Very shortly thereof. And on her deathbed, she makes Thomas promise to never remarry. She had a horrible stepmother. She did not want her children to be raised by a wicked stepmother. So she makes Thomas, on her deathbed, promise to never remarry. Now, going back to these men are men with urges, with desires. Thomas Jefferson, of course, probably looks at Sally Hemings. Now, the thing about Sally Hemings that everyone needs to understand, Sally Hemings is the half-sister of his wife, Martha. Her father had a child with one of the slaves. So Sally Hemings is mixed race. She's black and white, or what they consider under the law to be a mulatto. How much? There's not a portrait of either woman that survives. So this is purely speculative, as is Thomas Jefferson is a racist, as is Thomas Jefferson is a rapist. It's all speculative, circumstantial. So this is my circumstantial, my speculation. Sally Hemings may have looked a lot like Martha. They may have had the same mannerisms. They may have spoke similar. They may have, looked alike. And Thomas Jefferson is probably attracted to her because of how much Sally may remind him of his wife. And Sally may have been attracted to Thomas Jefferson. I mean, he's very Robert Redford-like. He's a very good-looking man. He's very powerful, tall, thin, athletic. He rode his horse every day. He went jogging every day. But you didn't know they jogged in the 18th century, but he did. So he's very athletic. So he's a very nice-looking man. And, she may have been attracted back. The dynamics are a little complicated because he's master, she's slave. I understand that. And she may have been looking at Jefferson and saying, okay, you like me? Okay, well, maybe if I have this relation with you, maybe I'll get my freedom. Maybe I can get freedom from my family members. So she may have been looking at it also as maybe a quid pro quo if she's not attracted to him. But she could have been attracted to him. She could have wanted a quid pro quo of freedom for herself or her family. Again, all speculative. But the thing is Jefferson never acknowledges this relationship. So there is no acknowledgement of this relationship with Sally Hemings coming from him. I don't believe she ever spoke out on the relationship. And the accusations of the relationship were coming from John Adams's campaign for presidency when he ran against Thomas Jefferson. So this is a dirty politic mudslinging accusation that was thrown at Thomas Jefferson that he slept with Sally Hemings. So there's no confirmation that this is actually ever true. And then I know you're going to counter with, well, there are black people today that have DNA proof that they are ancestors of Thomas Jefferson, or descendants of Thomas Jefferson. Here's the catch. DNA at that time went through the mother's line, right? And I told you that Martha and Sally were sisters. So they are related. So if you're going through the mother's line, it doesn't matter whether you're related to Martha or to Sally. It's going to go back to the same ancestor because they came from the same ancestor, her father. So that doesn't really clear anything up necessarily if it's going through the mother's line, because they would still be related to Jefferson through Martha, if I understand it correctly. And, Sally was half black, half white. So, again, it depends upon the makeup of the family as you go down the line. So, I'm not saying that, Jefferson slept with Sally Hemings. I'm not saying he did or he didn't. He said, I'm not commenting on my personal life and I'm not commenting on that. And so that was an accusation that was used as mudslinging against him in a very dirty presidential campaign that would make Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton blush. It was so dirty. Go back and look at the newspapers from that presidential election, and you'll see it was dirty, filthy, the lies going back and forth on both sides. But that's my time. If you like what I had to say, if you're intrigued, comment, subscribe, like, And also let me know, because I am someone who works in the history field. Do let me know what topics you'd like to see covered in history, and I'll be willing to cover it for you. All right, till then, have a happy life. Peace out. Oh, and one more thing. If I'm the president of the University of Virginia, and these were students who covered the Jefferson statue, I'd expel you immediately. And why would I do that? Not that Jefferson would have minded that he's being protested. He understands he's a controversial figure. But I would expel you because I know you don't want to go to a school that was founded by a racist and a rapist, for one. And for two, I would expel you and put a student in your place who would actually utilize that university for what it's for, learning. And I'd put a student in there who wants to go to that university, who wants to learn, and who wants to earn a degree, and who wants to have a better life. That's why I'd expel you if you were my student. Peace out. See you later. Good night. Hasta la vista, baby.